Your inner critic speaks to you every single day. It questions your decisions. It comments on your behavior. It reminds you of your mistakes, your weaknesses, and everything you didn't do well enough. Most of the time, you don't even notice it. You assume it's your own voice. You assume it's logic. You assume it's realism. You think it's helping you stay grounded. You think it's protecting you from embarrassment, failure, or rejection. But it's not. In reality, your inner critic is quietly shaping your life in the background. It influences what you try and what you avoid. It decides when you speak and when you stay silent. It controls how visible you allow yourself to be. And over time, it slowly rewrites how you see yourself. You don't become who you want to be. You become who the inner critic allows you to be. The inner critic is not intuition. It's not wisdom. And it's definitely not truth. Psychologically, it's a learned mental pattern, a voice built from early experiences, from criticism you received, from comparison with others, from moments when standing out felt dangerous. Its original job was simple: keep you safe. Safe from rejection, safe from judgment, safe from pain. The problem is that safety and growth don't follow the same rules. What once helped you fit in now prevents you from moving forward. Instead of warning you occasionally, the inner critic speaks constantly. Instead of protecting you, it controls you. And at some point, you stop questioning it. You stop noticing the voice. You stop separating from it. You start believing it. That's when the inner critic becomes dangerous. The inner critic rarely screams. It doesn't need to. It whispers. It shows up quietly at precise moments. Right before you take action. Right before you try something new, right before you put yourself out there, before you send a message, before you share an idea, before you apply for an opportunity, before you say what you really think. It says things like, "You're not ready yet. Other people are more qualified. This isn't the right time. You'll probably mess this up. Just wait a little longer." And if you do act, it doesn't disappear. It comes back afterward. It replays the situation in your head. It focuses on the smallest mistake. It ignores everything that went right. One awkward sentence becomes the entire memory. One hesitation becomes proof of failure. This creates a cycle: hesitation before action, self-attack after action. Over time, this cycle produces overthinking, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. You start living inside your head instead of your life. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're being managed by a voice designed for survival, not fulfillment. One of the most damaging ways the inner critic controls you is by minimizing your successes. When something goes well, it doesn't celebrate. It dismisses. "That was luck. That wasn't a big deal. Anyone could have done that. Next time will be harder." Your brain registers effort, but it never stores achievement. Psychologically, confidence is not something you're born with. It's not personality. It's not mindset. Confidence is memory. It forms when your brain collects evidence that you can handle challenges. The inner critic deletes that evidence. You move on too quickly. You downplay progress. You never let success settle. So your brain never updates your self-image. You keep acting like the same insecure version of yourself, even when reality says otherwise. The second way the inner critic sabotages you is by amplifying mistakes. A small error becomes a defining moment. A minor failure becomes a personal flaw. Your brain already has a negativity bias. It pays more attention to threats than to safety. The inner critic exploits this bias. Instead of learning from mistakes, you replay them. Instead of adjusting behavior, you retreat. Mistakes stop being feedback. They become identity. You don't think, "That didn't work." You think, "I'm bad at this. I'm not cut out for this. This proves something about me." And once something becomes identity, change feels threatening. Because changing behavior is one thing, but changing identity feels risky. So you avoid situations where failure is possible, not because you can't handle them, but because the inner critic convinced you that mistakes are dangerous. The third and most powerful weapon of the inner critic is paralysis. It doesn't stop you with fear. It stops you with delay. Prepare more. Learn a bit more first. Wait until you're confident. Don't rush. This sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds responsible. But confidence does not come before action. It comes after repeated action. Perfection never arrives. And waiting creates the illusion of safety while quietly reinforcing avoidance. This is how self-sabotage really works. Not through chaos, not through self-destruction, but through hesitation, through endless thinking, through postponing decision, through staying invisible. The inner critic convinces you that inaction is intelligence. Over time, your world gets smaller, not because you failed, but because you didn't move. Opportunities pass quietly, connections fade, potential stays theoretical. And the most dangerous part is this: it feels normal. You start believing this is just who you are, but it's not. Your inner critic is not evil, it's outdated. There is another reason the inner critic is so difficult to notice. It often disguises itself as responsibility. It tells you it's being realistic, that it's helping you avoid mistakes, that it's keeping your expectations under control. But realism does not constantly attack your worth. Healthy self-evaluation is specific and temporary. The inner critic is vague vague and permanent. It doesn't say, this part needs work. It says, this says something about you. Over time, this creates a constant background tension. You feel pressure even when nothing is happening. You feel behind even when you're progressing. You feel guilty for resting and anxious for trying. This is why the inner critic is exhausting, not because it's loud, but because it never fully turns off. Even moments of calm feel conditional. You relax, but only temporarily, because somewhere in the background, the voice is waiting for the next mistake, waiting for the next opportunity to remind you that you could lose everything. And the longer this goes unnoticed, the more normal it feels. Until you forget that life can feel lighter than this. It learned its rules in a different environment, a time when fitting in mattered more than standing out, when mistakes felt dangerous instead of useful, when approval felt necessary for survival. You don't silence it with motivation. You don't overpower it with confidence. You weaken it with structure. The first step is separation. Stop calling the inner critic me. Psychologically, distance reduces emotional authority. When a thought feels like identity, it controls behavior. When it feels like a voice, it becomes negotiable. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, say, my inner critic says I'm not good enough. That single shift creates space. You're no longer inside the thought, you're observing it. And what you observe, you can influence. The inner critic loses power the moment it stops feeling like truth. The second step is shifting from identity to behavior. The inner critic attacks who you are. I'm incompetent. I'm awkward. I'm not disciplined. I'm not built for this. Identity-based language shuts down learning. Replace it with behavior-based language. Not, I'm bad at this. But this attempt didn't work. Not, I always fail. But this approach needs adjustment. The brain can improve behavior. It cannot repair a destroyed identity. When identity is protected, progress becomes possible again. The third step is installing a neutralizing ritual. You don't argue with the inner critic. You don't debate it. You don't try to convince it. You disengage. Each time the voice appears, you respond the same way. You write the thought down. You label it as inner critic. You redirect your attention to the next small action. No emotion. No analysis. No self-attack. Consistency matters more than intensity. Over time, the brain learns a new rule. The voice no longer controls behavior. And when behavior continues, emotion follows. The inner critic fades not because you defeated it, but because it stopped being effective. Your inner critic is not the enemy, but it should not be the leader. You don't need more confidence. You don't need more motivation. You need less obedience to an outdated voice. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates choice. And choice creates change. Which step will you try first? Leave a comment below.